Hi everyone. Sorry about the connection that I had. I am going to finish my presentation on here. Okay, so like I started out with the last time, the chapter that Miss Schubert did, chapter 29, it kind of ties into chapter 30, which is what I'm doing. So chapter 30 is about finding a job after these ex-offenders get out of prison. So each year, 600,000 prisoners get released back into society, and they want immediate employment, which is a very tough thing for these ex-offenders because employers do not want to employ someone who's been in prison, especially if they've been in prison for, assault or murder or robbery, these things that could possibly happen on their watch. So that's one of the major challenges. The research showed that women residing in a community correction work release facility were more likely to find a job after prison because this helped them. But the concerns with this release program was housing, employment, family, reuniting with their families, especially the women wanting to be reunited with their children. And treatment was one of the other issues that they were concerned with. So in this study, there were 35 women. That were studied, which was one of the major problems because A, it was only women, and B, there was only 35 of them. So it wasn't a very accurate study. However, this is what the study was. So 35 women were involved in the study, but only 33 agreed to share their experiences and share their what's the word I'm looking for? 33 only wanted to share the results. Okay, so one of the major problems is many have a lack of education. When they come out of prison, maybe they weren't taking education courses when they were in prison, so this is one of the major problems. And if you don't have an education, not many employers want to give you a job. Also, state laws. Some of the state laws in certain states they can't. Certain employers can't hire these ex-offenders. Another problem was that they had poor employment history, and lack of skills. No employer wanted to hire them if they didn't have the necessary skills that were needed in their job. Another issue was health factors. If they were sick or if they were mentally ill, a lot of these women had problems getting jobs. But this is also just everyone that would have health issues would have a problem getting jobs. So the women faced challenges because they were primary caregivers of their children. Not many employers want to give women a job, especially if they have a kid at home that needs to be taken care of, because they're going to need time off to go take the kid to the doctor. And a lot of them were the primary caregiver because they were the only caregiver. So that was a problem with some of the women that were involved in this study. They also relied on social networking to get their jobs. So social networking was one of the helpers. Okay, so many of the women and many just ex-offenders in general tend to get jobs through their families and friends or former employers that they maybe worked for before they went to prison. So the public perception of criminal records had a lot to do with it. Employers do not want to hire ex-offenders and have them in the public eye because people just don't want to see that when they walk into a food place. Oh, that person was in jail. Do they have to release that that information to the public? No, they don't. But word gets around, especially, say, in a small town, when you know someone's went to prison. So there was halfway houses that these women went into that helped them a lot to get jobs. So they had halfway houses, community correction facilities, which all helped them get a job. Researchers evaluated the women in the halfway houses. So, this is where these 35 women came from. So there was a 3-phase system in the halfway house. And it says on page 527 that there were, it provided residents with certain privileges as they achieve certain goals and maintain good standing in the program. So if they have a good record, if they do what they're supposed to do, they're more likely to get help from this halfway house. Once the residents had arrived at the halfway house, they were required to participate in a 2-week program orientation and were unable to leave the facility unescorted. So during this program, they just they started to learn how they were going to get a job, how they were going to keep a job. They had to make sure that they were staying clean so that they could get released out into the public. Okay. Sorry, I fell. Okay. So in this study, there were 35 women that were available to get interviewed. Only 33 wanted to participate, and only 29 wanted to be recorded after their interview. It's not really relevant, but so they basically 76% of these women were able to find jobs, which is the majority. 3 of them did not find work because of health issues. They had mental issues or just health issues in general. 64% landed jobs in low-skill jobs, so your McDonald's or your pretty low-end side of the jobs. So the analysis, one of the things it says in the analysis is that after comparing the participants' employment history with their job search experience, there was a useful triangulation method that provided greater context for their experiences. So the study sample was, the average age was 39, and the women were primarily African American, 52%, followed by 27% that were white and 21% that were Hispanic. The average length of time participants remained in the program were 202 days, with a range of 51 days to 475 days. So that's quite a bit. The length of time in the program varied and often depended on how much time remained on their sentence until parole eligible. like I said before, 64% landed low-skilled jobs. More than half of the sample was unmarried, 61%, and the majority at least had one child under the age of 18, 64%. 60% of the participants had high school diplomas or GEDs. And 67% were frequently employed prior to incarceration. So that just goes back to our work history. Employers, if they know that the work history was not good before, they're not going to want to hire someone that's not dependable. So that was very, very important in this study. So moving on to page 530, the results, like I said, 76% were able to secure employment, but only 64% of them landed in low-skilled jobs, which was, again, the majority. But the job barriers, they were discouraged and anxious about their jobs, very frustrated. Many of them struggled with anxiety, thus not being able to hold out a job. But one thing that I found very interesting was on page 534. Many of the women that were in the halfway house had a tough time at their job because they were unfamiliar with the area. So they were anxious, frustrated because they didn't know the area that they were working in and the area that they were being housed at. So that was very interesting to me. But one of the women that were interviewed, her quote says that they have to stamp the job search form with the company name, basically that you will show that you have been there. So this halfway house is worried that they're going to lie about going out and finding a job. This interviewee in particular took care of her business, she says, and it was not hard for her because she is not ashamed as far as her criminal behavior and her drug addiction. So that's just one of the interviewees that did not have to worry about being embarrassed or being anxious about her past. I mean, it is what it is. It's not something she can change now. So that was very interesting to me, and that interviewee stood out. But basically, to wrap it up, these women had tough times finding a job. However, they were able to do it through this halfway house. So it's very important, and I think when these ex-offenders go back out into society, that they get help from these halfway houses or from these programs that will allow them to get a job and secure it. And I feel like if they're in a halfway house, they're doing something better for themselves, because you have to be clean in a halfway house. You have to, and in these programs, they watch you and they maintain you. You know, I think that these women deserve a job because they are trying, and they are putting themselves out there, and they're trying to get better. I understand where the employers are coming from, that they just are scared, but at the same time, these women are too. So that's basically it. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. Okay, so one thing before we close out, I just wanted to go over the study limitations. I know I already did, but it was a small sample size, and due to that, this method does not allow for generalizing of findings. There is probably a lot more people, not even just women, this is only talking about women, but there are a lot more people that probably go through the same thing, and there's numbers where 20% get jobs, where minority does not get the jobs. So it's very important that we understand that this study was not based on a very large scale. It was a very small study, and for that we do not have the correct numbers that we probably should. But this was a great example, and it was very interesting to understand how these women feel, and how, you know, because in my opinion, I feel like it would be easier for a woman ex-offender to get a job, basically because they're a woman. I know that sounds terrible, but that is just the society we live in today. So I would have really liked to see the men's side of this, how men get jobs, because I feel like it talked about in the beginning that women are probably the primary source of care for their child. So, I mean, men might not be. So what are the different challenges in men and women trying to find a job? That's what I would have really liked to know. Thank you. I'm sorry for the bad connection. I hope everyone gets this video and is able to watch it. Stay safe. Check out the bloopers. Okay, so in this... Gosh, dang it. My bad. Oh, again, I dropped my phone. Yeah.